Welcome to Our Watch with Tim Thompson. I am not Tim Thompson, as you probably are already aware. My name is Simon Cooper. I'm more of a behind-the-scenes guy with Our Watch. But the reason I'm here today filling in for Pastor Tim is he made a very important decision as a godly man to put his family first. His daughter is having his fourth grandchild, which he knew was coming soon, but didn't realize it was going to be today. And so we have this interview lined up with Victor Marx today for the Our Watch program, and so I'm going to be conducting that interview, and I'm blessed and privileged to be able to be in this seat doing that today. So thank you all for joining us. We're glad you're here. Our guest today is Victor Marx. He is, among many things, the world's fastest gun disarmer. He is a 7th degree black belt in Cajun Karate Kaichu. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly.
Good.
All right. And he's an accomplished author and filmmaker. He's the founder of All Things Possible Ministries. And even more importantly than that, he's a godly man. He has been rescued by God and has come from being victim to victor. And so today we're happy to be talking to Victor. So Victor, welcome to Our Watch.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I'm sure excited for Tim and his bride to have their fourth grandbaby.
Yeah, and you're a grandfather yourself.
5 of them.
Okay.
And they're all girls.
Got your challenges cut out for you.
Oh, I do.
Now, so do you foresee any grandsons in the future?
Lord willing,
Yeah.
we'd love to have one carry our name. And he'll be spoiled, I'm sure, pretty good. So, yeah, we have 2 of our 5 children that aren't married yet. So we'll see. But we're girls. I got a super soft spot in my heart for girls. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, good. So the opportunities are endless at this point for future grandchildren that'll be coming. But
Yes.
for the 5 that you have now, tell me, what is the love of a grandfather like compared to the love of a father?
That's a great question. I used to ask my friends that. I would say, "Man, what's the difference?" And no one could really explain it. And they tried, and it wasn't until I was in that hospital room after our daughter delivered our first grandchild, and I walk in there and I get to hold the baby. This is the best way I can explain it. And again, I don't even think I'm doing it justice. But I remember holding her and looking at my daughter and then her her baby girl. And I remember distinctly thinking, this is not my child. This isn't my child. But I would die or kill for her.
Yeah.
It was instant, and it was deep. And that's the best way I can describe the sense of she's from us, but she's not ours specifically. But boy, would I do anything to protect this?
Yeah. A love that knows no bounds, obviously. And I believe that is ingrained in us from God the Father when we are fathering our children and our grandchildren, and just being men in society. Speaking of which, masculinity has been under great attack for quite a while now. We've seen many ways that fatherhood has been being attacked. And the role of men as fathers and as grandfathers and as men of the community as leaders is something that has been a real struggle over the last several years, and it just seems like it's heating up all the more as the days go on. But tell me, Victor, what do you see as the most important role of a man in not only his family, but in the community?
Well, I had the benefit of working for and with a gentleman who, man, he read the tea leaves long before the wheels fell off, and it was Dr. James Dobson. I was an assistant to him, decades ago, and he talked about if the breakdown of the family continues to happen, the society will break down. And boy, he was prophetic, and he had that wisdom of God's word. And he would always talk about men, be husbands, be fathers, or else the family will crumble because it was under attack then, and then society. And think about it, me and you, and when we were young men without gray manes,
I call it blonde, but
okay,
yeah,
there you go.
we know what you mean.
We never thought we would see kids cutting body parts off,
No.
transvestites masquerading like beyond boldly. I mean, from the Pentagon to school to it was beyond what we could have ever imagined, and it happened. So, with that as a context, it's I think the most dangerous aspect to our nation is the lack of men, just to be men, in the roles of single men, warriors, husbands and fathers, and especially fathers.
Yeah. Fathers have a huge role, and that's been no exception for you. And how many children do you have?
5.
Okay, 5 children and 5 grandchildren. All right, so you've had a lot of experience there. Now, people who are meeting you or hearing from you for the first time might think that you probably grew up in a household where you were raised to be a godly man, and that you were given training in all things that have led to what you do in the realm of just physical activity and the people that you work to save and to protect. You're a man's man. You are clearly somebody who understands what it means to be masculine and the importance of that as a man, so that many people would probably think that's the background that you come from. But your story is a little bit differently than that. Can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, and you're right. People are shocked when they find out by either reading the book or seeing the film on my story. But yeah, my father, he abandoned my mom when she was pregnant. They were actually divorced, and they got back together the night I was conceived. He put rosary beads down her throat and then put a pistol to her head. And if I could have looked outside of and seen that, that's what was happening. So I was really, I was, forged in violence, not love. And yet, there's a lot of people watching this. They come from, backgrounds that aren't right. And I will tell them first, it is right by God the Father's. He will redeem everything when people mess it up. But my mother would go on to marry like 6 times. And my father, he didn't claim me early on as his kid. And I didn't meet him till I was, a little bit older. And I went to 14 schools, 17 different houses. And my early childhood was a lot of abuse, physical and sexual. And that was the imprint that I had. And I think the biggest thing is it caused me to not want to trust adults. And then people, and certainly not ever see God as a father. Because the only view I had of a father was all the negative things. And if somebody's watching or listening, and they know about abuse, I'm going to tell them right now, one of the most important things I can say is that the abuse wasn't your fault, that the shame is not yours, never was. Abusers make you feel like it's your fault, it's your shame, but it wasn't, and it's on them. So God, a Father, is loving, and He is so capable of redeeming even the worst of what the enemy can do in a child's life or an adult.
Yeah, and thankfully, you were one of the rare exceptions of somebody who was rescued from a situation like that in a way that didn't become the end of your story. That didn't become who you were defined as or what really shaped the course of your life and what God was going to do in your life. Unfortunately, we know that there's men and women out there that have grown up in many forms of abuse and have not had the modeling of a godly home and a godly father, and they've experienced a lot of trauma and abuse and so on. And you're one that has been delivered from that. God met you on that road. You answered, and He's provided a much better way. And so I think what's important to talk about is that those that do come from a background similar to yours and the one that you described, where there's that guilt and that shame, there's that condemnation and just feeling of worthlessness, that God has other plans for them too. And to be able to get that message out so that they can see who God has created them to be, like you. But it takes a response. And at one point in time, you were presented with the gospel of Jesus Christ, and you responded. And so what was it that really ultimately led you to wanting to allow God into your heart and heal you from all these things?
That's a great question. I ended up joining the Marine Corps, and it was 6 months before I got out the Marines and I was stationed here at Camp Pendleton when I got a letter from my biological dad. And I only met him a couple of times, but it was the role of a father who was a horrible example of one. Now, this was my biological. This wasn't my stepfather's the one who did the abuse. But my biological dad wrote a letter, and he said, hey, I know. Well, he called me son. That's a dear son. And that made me mad. So I want to address people who struggle with anger. Anger is a secondary emotion, by and large. And people who've been abused or suffered injustice, they have a right to be angry. You can't just whip it away or pretend. And Christians are so good about compartmentalizing and minimizing, well, praise the Lord. It's like, well, you're not even being honest with yourself. You should be angry. Jesus was angry. Jesus wept. John the Baptist. You can't just shove it away because it will come out one day. Most of the time it's very negative. So using anger for positive things is the way to go. But, it's being able to trust God. And I did do the letter because he said, hey, I want to meet you. Come visit me. And I went down, and he said in the letter that he had come to faith in Jesus Christ. And I was like, what's the angle? What possibly could he want? But I went down, visited with him, and here he is, a guy who was a bouncer for 27 years, black belt in karate and jiu-jitsu, a boxer. He was a tough dude. But then he got highly educated because he was trying to help himself through academia. And none of it worked. It was only through an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ that touched his life, and he surrendered. And someone went visit him. He says, hey, I started going to church, and do you want to go? It's like, And he was training fighters. So he said, hey, so my fighters are going. So now I'm a Marine. I'm like, well, I ain't scared. I'll go.
Yeah.
I ain't scared of church. And I went. I'll tell you, Simon, I heard the gospel, but I'd heard it before. It wasn't new to me. And because I was born Catholic, raised Baptist, we became Pentecostal. We did some charismatic stuff, had a rabbit's foot. I studied Buddhism. So I wasn't shy of spiritual things.
Yeah.
But that day, June 22nd, 1986, it really pierced my heart. And God used the worship music in order to soften me like anesthesia, so that when the man preached, it got right to me. And that's when I was like, I'll never forget, he's like, if you want to get your business right with God, just come forward. And I did, man. I ran forward, literally. And I could feel these waves of God's love for me. And I never felt that. I never felt God's love. And it was real. And I I could feel my sins being forgiven and taken away. And I could feel him replacing all that anger and hatred and even my own sin of what I had messed up, just with love. And I had surrendered my life to him. I'll tell you, he got the short end of the stick, that's for sure.
God got the short end
of the stick. Yeah.
Well, no, I think that he's got a pretty good servant in you and what you've been able to bring to the world and what your mission is. And on that note, tell us a little bit more about what is the mission of Victor Marx and All Things Possible Ministries.
Yeah, we started off over 20 years ago reaching kids who are incarcerated, troubled youth, because there was a great harvest field in youth facilities around our nation that not many people were going after. They can't tithe. There's a lot of non-benefit from that, except God loves them kids, boys and girls, and he sent us in. And that's where he was teaching us, you got to be willing to repel into hell in order to rescue. Young people that not necessarily had a choice about their upbringing. They're responsible for their choices being there. But I'll give you an example. One kid at 16 years old, he had a tattoo on his neck said Lucky. And he was in a mental hospital, but it was max security, 16-year-old. I said, Lucky? I said, man, is that your real name? He goes, no, but that's what I've always been called. He goes, I said, what are you lucky about? He says, well, my dad's being put in the death chair. I said, he is? He said, yep, he got the death penalty. So that's one thing I'm looking for. Another, I'm alive. And I was like, well, what's he being put to death for? He goes, well, he murdered my mom. And this kid started telling me how his dad used to, tie him up and inject him with heroin as a little kid, pull him out of the bed when he was sleeping at night, drag him through the house out into the woods and say there's demons everywhere. I mean, kids that's not their choice.
Right.
And then he said, my sister's in here too, because they had done a crime together, like steal something. And so I was able to pray with him, give him hope for his future. And I said, you know what luck is? It's living under Christ's kindness. The fact that you're still alive shows that God loves you. So that's how we started it, but it sure grew fast. And we've just tried to be faithful to do what we do. But I think people started finding out more about us when we continued to rescue kids, but the stakes were higher. And we got known by helping to rescue, recover, and help victims traumatized by ISIS overseas, where we end up getting a home, multiple safe houses, and helping, again, kids or women that have been kidnapped by ISIS and abused. And, somebody, because the book came out, Dangerous Gentleman, recently, in an interview, somebody said, well, when did you retire, sir? And I started laughing. I said, not long ago, me and my wife led a team again into Iraq and rescued a girl who had been kidnapped as a teenager, held for 9 years. 9. Had 2 children in captivity. And we got her and her little boys free out of an ISIS confinement stronghold. And she's back with her family. The family thought she was dead. They didn't even know they had grandkids. So, and my wife led that team as far as the first point of contact with the girl. And I was watching her get all jocked up as we were getting ready for the mission that night. And I was like, she's literally putting in her weapon, because we don't like violence, but we sure not going to be stopped if somebody's trying to be violent. But she put on her body armor, put a jacket, a coat on, really nice, all low profile. But when she grabbed a grenade out of our armory, puts it in a bag and puts it in her pocket, and then her AK's on the side, I'm looking at her going, I don't know whether to be turned on or terrified right now, girl, because
Right.
it's about to get real.
Yeah.
And you know what? God gets all the glory,
Yeah.
but our teams are phenomenal individuals who have lots of experience doing very high-risk things. And again, that's our kinetic team of, but we got prayer teams. We have support financial teams because we don't take any money from governments, period. That enables us to do everything under one kingdom, God's kingdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. So you guys are literally, you and your wife and your team are going into the darkest of the dark places to be able to bring God's love and his hope and to be able to remove people from these situations that they may have thought that they had no hope of. And the fact that you can have your wife at your side doing that, and the way that you just described your wife in that way, I think that's the mark of a godly woman there. You know, when you can see her as a beautiful, feminine woman, yet at the same time, somebody who is also on a mission from God and has a charge to be strong and to be able to use her skills and her talents. And so that's awesome that you have the privilege and the opportunity to be able to do that. Can't be any better than being able to be involved in that kind of ministry work with the one that you love the most. And so with all these people that these children and these women have been at such risk that you've been able to get out of their situation and bring them to a safe place, all from the love of the Father, and being able to show them that love so that they could understand and have their own relationship with Christ, the very one that saved you from that difficult upbringing and that trauma and has provided all the healing. Now you and your team are able to help them with that. And I just think about all the connections here. You mentioned that it was your biological father that had reached out to you after all those years. Without him having reached out to you, because he did, that touched you somewhere real deep in your heart, that you knew that you needed it and you craved it and you wanted to be able to respond to that. So would you say that there's ever a time in a man's life, if he's a father, if he's messed up, if he's blown it, if he's screwed his kids up, for lack of better words, by not being the father he was supposed to be, is there ever a time where it's too late? Or is there always a chance for that father to be able to redeem that time and be able to make that connection that can have a world of difference for their children?
Yeah, it's never too late. And the first time my father and I spoke together was at a Focus on the Family Dr. James Dobson event. And there was a ton of people there. And I shared my story, and then I introduced my dad. And I'll never forget his main thing he said. He says, men, fathers, it's never too late to be a dad. Never too late. And he was just a living example of that. And again, I want to say this to men, is reject passivity, accept responsibility, walk close with the Lord, let him empower you. And even if your kids are hating on you, you can still love on them. As long as they're not weird and abusive and crazy, you just still show them love. Maybe have boundaries if it gets crazy, and honor their boundaries, but show the love of the Father through you. That's the most powerful thing you can do.
And that is what God the Father has modeled for us, for prior to our relationship with him, or sometimes even during, we can be that disobedient, we can be that child that is not always acting the way that
Amen.
God would want us to, but he shows us that grace and he shows us that love constantly. So we're thankful for that. And Victor, thank you so much for sharing your story, and this will definitely give hope to fathers out there that are either doing it great to just keep on going with what you're doing, and if you're not, there's still hope. You need to get closer to God, and therefore you're going to be closer to your children, and therefore they'll be closer to God as well. And that is such an important part of your role as a man and as a father. There's just so many things to be thankful for. I think we could probably talk for hours. There's so much we'd like to learn from you, Victor. But how can the people watching today be able to follow you and stay up to date with everything that you and All Things Possible Ministries are doing?
Thanks, Simon. You can go to victormarx.com, and that is our website. We're on all social medias, and once they really want to track, we have courses online. We just released a film today called The Unseen War. And that's one of our best resources we have. So, yeah, they can get the book, Dangerous Gentlemen. We have resources that can help them. That's why we're doing this. So I really invite them to come take a look.
And so I want to thank you all for watching our watch today. And we're so grateful that you've joined us. Hopefully you're following all the social media channels. If you haven't already become a watchman at ourwatch.com, go ahead and do that so you can stay up to date and you can get all the benefits of being an Our Watchman or Watchman subscriber. So check out ourwatch.com. Victor, thank you again for being with us today, and God bless you.
Thank you, brother.